Congratulations on your ASC
Thank
Award
you.
nomination.
So excited. It's a dream to even just be recognized for work, let alone for the ASC to can even acknowledge or even recognize what you're doing, which is just unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, you've shot 15 episodes of The Bear,
Yeah,
so more than anyone else has. Like you've shot the majority of this series, including obviously this nominated
yeah,
episode. I would love to start with just your experience on the show in general,
sure.
what drew you to it, and like, what it's been like creating, your visual aesthetic for the show.
Yeah, it's for me, Chris Storr, who's the creator and predominantly director of the series, is a long-term friend of mine. So, I knew about the show for a really long time. It originally was a movie 10 years ago. And so I've always was hoped to be able to be a part of it. And I was lucky enough to be a part of it. And, um, I was on another show when they did the pilot, so I wasn't able to do that. But, kind of knowing that when it did come back, I was so lucky for Chris to let me come aboard and finish out season one, and then season two came around, and we had some great help from Chloe and Adam, and they helped with two episodes, and I was able to handle everything else, and it's just been an absolute dream to be a part of. It's an aesthetic that doesn't really fall into TV. It feels different. It feels like we approach every episode as a feature, and we can kind of approach everything from a different perspective every time, and so it has a tonal kind of connection through every episode, but it feels very very kind of approachable in a sense that we can kind of do what we want and let the story dictate the style. And it shows in season two. We have episode six, Fishes, which is our flashback, and then we have episode seven that follows it, and then we have episode 10, which is what ASC nominated us for. All three are extremely different visual styles, but all feel so much of the Bear, and that's what's just so fun about it.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool that a show can retain whatever makes it itself, but go in all these different visual directions. I'd love to delve into episode 10 and what was the unique take on that style that
Mm-hmm.
you applied there.
10 was another kind of it's kind of the culmination of the season to get to like Chris's style. It's like, we play homage throughout the season to all these filmmakers that we love. And we get to 10 and you can kind of see a little bit of like the different styles that we've done throughout the season, but you really can feel it's Chris at that point. And it goes to, again, attempting an extended take. We start the episode off with, I think it's 12 or 14 minutes of, uncut oneer throughout this new kitchen. And it just, the challenge to show movement through space and the lighting adjustments that happen between the front of house dining room to the kitchen to the prep island is dramatic. And it's just such a fun experience to figure out how to accomplish that task for Chris, while not cutting and but also making it invisible and finding ways to make it work for that thematical part of that episode. And then the idea behind it was like, okay, well, let's do this oneer again, and let's think the audience, let's trick them, like, okay, they're doing it again, but then we cut and we go into kind of this middle portion of the episode, which feels very phonetic. It feels like we're back to season one, and the energy of the cutting of the food, and the energy of the chefs working, and that kind of like chasing that clock where Richie finishes service. And the idea there again is like, okay, well, maybe the audience thinks we're done there, and let's go into the third style of that very kind of slow paced dolly work of Carmy getting stuck in the freezer and the downfall and kind of everything that's happening to him, and that moment of him seeing his life kind of losing what he loves, and that very doing a lot of very close up work on him, And it was just such an exciting script to kind of delve and break into different parts and showcase a lot of different visual styles. The intro oneer is handheld, and then it goes into a lot of our long lens phonetic putty kind of work in the middle, and then it goes to our very like smooth style studio work in the end. And for me, it just highlights all the different ways that we capture the show in one, and that's why I love it so much. It's just fun, like we do a lot of Zoom work. And it was just a way to kind of pay tribute to all the styles that we love. And I think people really kind of reacted to it emotionally, and that to me is just that kind of makes me happy to see that it's such a loved episode.
So I mean, you kind of talked about the three different styles throughout the episode, and I would, you touched upon the fact that, you're going between different kinds of lighting between the kitchen and
Yeah,
front of house and all of that. Uh, yeah, I mean, I'd love to just ask a little bit more about
sure.
lighting, because yeah, that is very, very tricky. So how did you approach that?
It was we knew we had three stops of exposure throughout that restaurant, and us we weren't able to really live light it like we did in season one, where we could adjust levels throughout the wonder of Carmi and the characters moving through space. Where, we had a front dining room which was very intimately lit. It was all down lights on the tables and very minimal kind of exterior night exposure coming in, and then the fill was very much of the kitchen through the slit of the window, so we had a little bit of a blue fill in there. um, I knew the only way of doing it was I used a variable ND on the front of the camera that had a motor on it. So I was able to
Mm.
do exposure adjustments throughout that oneer without adjusting my iris. And knowing that my base in the dining room was everything wide open 2.8 on the stop. We shoot at 3200 on the mini LF, so we're really pushing the exposure on that. And then the variable ND at a base of a one stop. So I knew I had to be wide open everywhere for dining room. And then the kitchen has a two stop increase. And then the prep table in the middle has an additional two stops. So it's quite a range of exposure. And the kitchen is also really bright blue light, and the dining room's a very soft, rich kind of tungsten light. And so it's really a beautiful kind of transition between the two spaces. And it came from obviously our prep of designing that kitchen from the ground up, and how to, have these elements of light that are both at kind of our eye level, which would be a lot of our edges, and then our top light, which would be a lot of our key in certain spaces, and allowed our actors to kind of move through a space that was lit 360 degrees. And they always would have a natural key and a natural edge. And it benefited to that shot at the end of, or the beginning of 10. And so I really just kind of live exposed the scene with a hand unit that was connected to a natural, variable ND filter, and it worked really well. And we're very
Wow.
happy that it worked out, because it would have been too jarring if I would have done it on the iris. I would have been going from a 2.8 in the dining room to an 11 in the kitchen, and
Yeah.
that visual change to the depth of field would have taken the audience out of it.
Yeah.
We use the doorway. So like when people would enter the kitchen or enter the dining room through that swinging doorway, we purposely design our LED lighting strips to go into the door. So we would get a lot of that like exposure bloom
Uh-huh.
blowing at the camera. So I would use that threshold as a way for me to do a really fast exposure pull.
Uh-huh.
And I hit it into that every time. So you could see that's where the big change is. And then anytime an actor would walk up to that island, I would really slowly start exposing that bringing that exposure down. And you can see it in the back walls. The walls get bluer,
Uh-huh.
obviously, because of the back gets darker, but it really felt invisible. And I think it really helps that whole sequence work. It's funny because I think people actually think there's cuts in the doorway. And
Uh-huh.
so there's a lot of like where season one we had our oneer episode 7, where there's a lot of conversation about this oneer that we did, and it's very obvious it's a oneer, but it still works to the style of the show, and it never felt done to be done. It felt it was purposeful to the story. But this time around when we did it, I think people didn't think it was a oneer again, and that to me that's even more of a compliment because it was done to a story that even worked more special to the idea of no cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously, Chris being the director who he is, and a lot of the music that we have in the show, we know beforehand. So he plays these tracks to us. So like we're choreographing camera work to music a lot of the time. So like
Mm,
it is just such an invisible film in a sense that I think it brings them in and it really holds them tight to the show until it ends. And I think it's just so many, contributing elements to that. And,
yeah.
at the end of the day, it's just like I've always believed to be as invisible as possible to the storyline. We really don't do anything just to do it. Everything's very purposeful.
Hmm.
And I think it does kind of pay off at the end
Absolutely.
for
Yeah,
sure.
well, I mean, is there anything else from this episode that I haven't asked about that you want to share?
I mean, obviously there's a really fun that like the split screen at the end between Carmi and Eben is real. We actually cut it on set and did the finished edge, and that's a in-camera split screen, which to me is just like the best way of doing it, and it worked so well.
Yeah.
And it really shows like that the distinguish of colors again, like so much of the show is playing with color contrast. It's really trying to build, your blue worlds and your warm worlds and your white worlds, and like but maintaining like color contrast within scene as well. Like, and that to me, I love how we're able to kind of like very delicately handle that. And I think it goes to a lot of like we do a lot of on-set color. So, I'm maintaining the color of the show on set through live grade. And it's very, you know, I take a lot of pride in the on-set color that I love to be a part of. And, it's just being able to play with that and having our live dimmer board op right next to me. And so we're doing color control and lights and color control and camera and post CDL color. And it's such a fun kind of orchestra of elements that kind of come together so well.
That's wonderful. So, I mean, you've kind of already talked about this, but what's it like to be nominated for an ASC award for your work on The Bear?
It's it's I don't know how to explain it because it's not anything I'd ever think I'd be so, privileged to be a part of. And I'm, beyond, beyond happy and honored. I mean, for a show like this, it's an entire Chicago made show. All the camera departments from Chicago, my operators are Chicago. I'm from Chicago. Like it's a really special thing for me because, this town hasn't been able to be able to, do that really almost ever. Like it's always been a town where we would outside hire key roles and key positions. And for me to be able to be a part of a show and to have my friends on it and to be able to make a show that's so loved and know that we just did it ourselves is like the biggest, accomplishment that we could ask for. And then having the ASC, acknowledge this group of people is just it's unbelievable.